Hello and welcome to Debunking TikTok, the dangers of misinformation and self-diagnosing from social media. My name is Jerry Sullivan. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm a therapist at Resolve. I see clients here and I also do some clinical supervision. Thank you so much for having me back to do another one of these CEU presentations for CARE4U2. I'm super excited to be involved in this initiative and I hope you all find this presentation useful. Today, we will be talking about TikTok and some of the mental health content that has been really popular on this platform, and some of the benefits and the risks associated in having more widespread access to mental health content on social media. So the objectives for today, one, we will discuss the rise of mental health content on TikTok and in social media. We will identify the benefits of this mental health content. We will identify the risks of this mental health content. And then we will spend some time combating misinformation related to a few different disorders, not all of them, but a few of the most popular ones of the moment, narcissism, neurodivergence, and borderline personality disorder. Then lastly, we will explore how to productively engage with the content. All right, so let's get started. First and foremost, what is a TikTok? If you're anything like me, where it's like even social media, trending, hashtags, TikTok, all of these things, what does it all mean? What is this stuff? I should say, a pretty baseline understanding. I don't even have a TikTok myself, but I do have Instagram. And I know that some of the most popular TikToks eventually make their way to Instagram a couple weeks after they're popular. So a lot of what I first started learning about this topic actually came from my nieces who were in high school and some of the things that they were learning about mental health and various diagnoses from videos they were seeing online. And so much of it was wrong. And so that was alarming to me as a mental health professional. But in some ways, I mean, they were talking to me about their mental health openly and with, some confidence, which I thought was really cool. So the more I explored this topic, the more I started to realize why it's so important to, dig into this a little more. So what is a TikTok? Social media in general refers to the means of interactions among people in which they create, share, and or exchange information and ideas in virtual communities and networks. One of the most popular platforms is TikTok. It's the one we'll focus on today, which primarily became popular because of its short form video feature. And many other platforms have since adopted this feature, but TikTok was the one to originate it and make it fun, make it cool. These are usually quick, visually stimulating videos that can be made by anyone about anything. While most of these features are used for entertainment by a lot of people, some are also seeking mental health information from these videos that have been posted lately. So why does this matter? Why is it important? TikTok's popularity rapidly increased at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, growing 180% among 15 to 25-year-old users in 2020 alone. During this time period, the Kaiser Foundation reported a spike in mental health concerns. About 4 in 10 adults in the US reported symptoms of anxiety or depressive disorder, increasing from 1 to 10 adults in 2019. So clearly, what we were experiencing worldwide regarding the pandemic definitely spiked just mental health questions, concerns, and personal experiences. There are now more than 18 billion views under the mental health hashtag on TikTok, ranging from users sharing their personal experiences with mental illness to providing tips on how to cope with its effects. And because of this accessibility, people may post basic information they find online, which can then be liked, shared, and retweeted by others, enabling people to inaccurately diagnose and treat themselves. Although lacking in credibility, this information still offers some benefits for users scrolling through social media. So we're going to dig into, the benefits and the risks here in just a moment. But before we do, let's just pause for a moment and think about these 18 billion views with people that are already experiencing an uptick in their own, mental health experiences. This is just massive accessibility, massive amounts of information, and not information that you even have to read a huge research article about anymore or go pick up a textbook or anything like that. These are short videos boiled down, an entire textbook of information boiled down to a 20-second video that's super entertaining that people can share and retweet, and there are 18 billion views. So that's sobering, at least in my opinion, that we are really able to dilute a lot of really, really good, important information to a very short video and then produce it at a mass quantity on a mass scale. So it's really no surprise that this has become a little bit problematic. However, let's talk about some of the benefits involved because it's kind of cool at the same time. And let's talk about why. So, potential benefits of this widespread access and accessibility. One, people are talking about mental health more often and openly, and that's something in the field we are very much advocating for, just destigmatizing mental health concerns. And even like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, my high school nieces are talking about mental health topics and making it feel pretty commonplace, which is amazing because for so long, these were things that were experienced in private with an element of, shame or embarrassment. And it's just not that way anymore, which is wonderful. And again, I guess that goes into my second point. It helps reduce the stigma and allows folks to share more about their health and well being. Um, this also provides a sense of community and belonging to those who may feel alone in their struggles with mental health. The ability to realize that a lot of people deal with some of these things. You're not alone. You're not crazy. Uh, yeah, you're not alone in your struggle. There's a community of people out there that are doing this work with you. And I think it can also inspire people to take a proactive approach to their mental health. Not only do we see videos about awareness, but we see a lot of videos about tips and tricks and what to do about it and what worked for some people and what hasn't worked for others. So it's inspiring to watch people dealing with their mental health concerns, actually trying things to alleviate some of the negative symptoms of their experiences. And it inspires other people to do the same. More benefits. Humor plays a significant role in discussions of mental health and mental illness online, which can feel therapeutic to many. Just the ability to laugh about some of these topics, to not take it so seriously. Humor doesn't work for everybody and it doesn't work every time, not always helpful, but man, it can feel good to just not take some of this stuff so seriously sometimes. And um, yeah, it just increases that sense of community and brings an ease to otherwise very uncomfortable topics. It also, these videos and this content is giving new language to people to better understand or talk about their own mental health. We'll talk about some of the terms like gaslighting and stimming and things that are being talked about a lot in these videos. These are terms that nobody really heard about, just a handful of years ago that are now fairly commonplace terms on social media and in just everyday conversations with people, thanks to these platforms. Also, these short form videos are just, it's a really clever way to bring awareness to overlooked or marginalized mental illnesses, specifically when we're trying to relay this information to young people. This is a super clever and efficient way to do it. And in doing so, it can provide knowledge or validation to some degree about some of these topics as well. Not all of it is a wash, not all of it is misinformation. It is providing some level of education along the way as well. But now let's talk about the risks involved because there are many, but we would be kidding ourselves if we skipped right to this part because clearly it's done us all a service in some ways as well. So the risks, let's spend some time here. Um, the content, unfortunately, can perpetuate misconceptions and misinformation. And I'm going to break down some specific examples in future slides of some of the diagnoses that are most heavily hit on, at least right now in the moment. But diagnosing a mental illness is actually a very complicated and lengthy process, and there are a lot of different factors that go into it. People, particularly young people, may believe that they have a diagnosis that doesn't really apply to them because, again, we're diluting an entire research body of work into a 20-second video saying, here are the signs and symptoms of OCD. And if you relate to any of them, I guess you have OCD, which is just not at all how it works. So it can be dangerous, especially when young minds have access to that and they believe that, what they're seeing in this box means exactly what it looks like it means, which you can't really blame them for assuming based on the way these TikTok videos are presenting some of this information. Um, but it's an important thing to consider, just how unhelpful it can be to dilute such a large body of work into such a short video. Next, another one of the risks is that it potentially downplays what can be really significant symptoms. And I'm pretty sure I expand upon that here, so I won't spend too much time there. So the content produced often, and I would go as far as to say almost never accounts for the presence of medical complications or concerns. For example, symptoms that are the result of brain tumors, hormonal changes, etc. These symptoms listed in these videos under various conditions could be the symptoms of a lot of different things. Sometimes they're not even psychological things. They're coming from medical issues. And there's just no way to account for those things or assess for those things in a TikTok video. So it can be quite dangerous. Also, potentially turning something that's very serious into a joke and making it seem like it's not a real concern or something that's light or funny isn't always a good thing to do. I know that humor is one of the benefits, but also the other side of that coin is the risk of turning it into a joke when it's actually not funny and it's serious and it's painful and you need to talk to a professional about it in addition to just experiencing the benefit that can come with laughing about it and trying to find the humor in it online. There's a next step that needs to be taken that unfortunately sometimes gets overlooked in the humor of it all. New research also seems to confirm that children, specifically that are dealing with complex mental health and environmental stressors or trauma, may see at least temporary increases in emotional symptoms after TikTok use. And I think there are several different reasons that play into that, but it's important to recognize that sometimes the very act of trying to alleviate some of our negative symptoms or, access information via TikTok after use can increase some of the difficult emotional symptoms after the use. So it can be counterproductive depending on the symptoms and the diagnoses present in the individual accessing the content. Next, another risk is glamorizing mental illness, making it look artistic or beautiful, funny, deep, etc. Again, anybody can create these. Often, we're seeing content creators, influencers, creating content to look a certain way, to be attractive, to gain views. And man, some of them make it look so cool and interesting and beautiful in some ways. And unfortunately, that can glamorize very serious, very painful mental illnesses, presenting it as something that it just isn't. Users seeing influencers gain popularity after sharing their mental health struggles can also be seen as a risk. Just the popularity and the notoriety that can sometimes come from struggling and sharing openly about your struggles can be dangerous. Because I think what that does is it leads people to believe that, okay, maybe I can become popular if I'm struggling with something like this. Maybe I'll fit in if I'm also dealing with these symptoms as well, when they might not be dealing with them otherwise. Next, creators sharing personal experiences can influence others to intervene or not intervene in potentially harmful ways. For example, taking deep breaths instead of going to their local ER, stopping their medication without consulting their doctor to switch to an herbal supplement that's being promoted in a video, crediting a recent psychotic break to them being a Gemini. And that is not a dig on Geminis. That is coming from an actual TikTok video I saw recently where a person realized they were not having a psychotic break, they're just a Gemini. That's not a dig. That's just, it's misinformation, is what it is. A psychotic break is much different than anything related to an astrological sign. Um, yeah, so that's just another example of just yeah, potentially harmful intervention recommendations on TikTok. And then also, things like quitting a job after now believing their boss is a narcissist based on a list they saw that might say this is how you know if your boss is a narcissist. And them thinking, oh, I have to quit now because all of the misinformation out there about narcissism leads them to believe that nothing can be done about their job situation. So these videos that are being posted often, I'd like to believe they're well intentioned, end up having the exact opposite effect on the people consuming the videos. Users seeking mental health support on TikTok rather than a trained professional. So, again, when people utilize TikTok as therapy rather than going to an actual therapist, it can be very dangerous. The potential risks involved also in the culture of comparison and cyberbullying that we're seeing on social media platforms may outweigh the benefits that some people experience. So, even if some people are really benefiting from the way that they are able to access mental health content online, is there another side of the coin in which they're dealing with bullying or comparison or an uptick in other symptoms of a different kind of disorder at the expense of receiving some support for a different kind of symptom that they originally went on to address? Excuse me. So those are just, some of the benefits, some of the risks involved with this content that's being produced right now. All right, so next we are going to spend some time combating common misconceptions. So I want to explore some popular misconceptions regarding these trending mental health concerns, specifically narcissism, neurodivergence, and borderline personality disorder. And before we start getting into the weeds of this, I want to point out this is not a deep dive into any of these diagnoses. Those would be 3 separate presentations, multiple presentations for each. So this is not to educate you necessarily about narcissism, neurodivergence, or BPD. It is really time spent pointing out some of the common misconceptions that people are saying about these things online, and then discussing what's actually true, or a fuller look at that one specific misconception that's being promoted online right now. So if you get to the end of this particular set of slides with more questions about these disorders than you had before we started, do not be surprised. And that, I think, is an indication of why, we need a larger body of research, a larger amount of time spent on each of these things rather than just snapshots online. But the snapshots I'm about to give you are simply the misconceptions that are being promoted and what's actually true. All right, so let's start with narcissism and NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder. So despite only 0.5 to 5% of people being diagnosed with NPD, it seems like everybody is related to, has dated, or works with a narcissist. We are seeing this a lot on TikTok right now. Signs my boss is a narcissist, signs my spouse is a narcissist, things like that. Evan Fredericks, who is a clinical social worker in Minnesota, who posts as Evan the counselor, he's very, very popular online, says there's no way this many people have encountered or been in a relationship with people with true NPD. That means, he says, that many people are being wrongly labeled as incurable and incapable of getting better. We all display narcissistic tendencies, but that doesn't mean that we or someone we know would meet the actual criteria for NPD. They're very different things, and the treatment for each of these things are very different. The ways that we're able to intervene and improve the situation looks very different with a person displaying narcissistic traits and a person who has full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. The path forward looks very different in each scenario. The perpetrators and victims of narcissistic behaviors are affected by this information as well. Labels give people an excuse for unhealthy behaviors, says Fredericks. It's very quick and easy to say someone is a narcissist for you to not take any responsibility for anything that's happened. It gives people the opportunity to put the blame on somebody else. Maybe the person in question can get better, and maybe you can too. That's just a harder part to sit with. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but when I was putting this together and even now reading it, yeah, sometimes these labels used as an excuse hurt hurt the people that are, being affected by the misinformation just as much as the people that are, the ones struggling with the narcissistic tendencies and symptoms for themselves. TikTok has been really useful in bringing the narcissistic trait of gaslighting into the conversation. Unfortunately, it's often referenced inaccurately. Um, a few years ago, most people had never even heard of the term gaslighting, and now it's pretty commonplace, both online and just in daily conversations, things that clients bring into sessions regularly. Gaslighting concerns. A lot of the information they have received about it has come from sources online. So let's talk about what gaslighting is and is not for a moment. Gaslighting is the psychological manipulation of a person, usually over an extended period of time, that causes the victim to question the validity of their own thoughts, perception of reality, or memories, and typically leads to confusion, loss of confidence and self esteem, uncertainty of one's emotional or mental stability, and a dependency on the perpetrator. Gaslighting is not simply when a loved one disagrees with you, tries to change your mind, or prefers to be right in an argument. Uh, and we are seeing a lot of the term gaslighting being promoted as the second part, that when a loved one disagrees with you or is trying to change your mind, you're being gaslit in some way. And the reason this is so important to understand the difference is because gaslighting is a pretty serious trait that is attached to narcissism and potential narcissistic personality disorder, and understanding that this can be a trait that somebody uses that they might be able to address or improve upon is important. When you know that there is access to help and relief and new ways to communicate, it completely changes what you will choose to do next in that relationship. And I think I expand upon it a little further right here. Determining the difference between narcissistic tendencies and true NPD can only be done by a trained mental health professional. If you or someone you love is affected in any way by narcissism, it's crucial they receive professional help to determine the best next steps. So really talking to somebody who can help you explore the relationship dynamics, the communication patterns in that relationship to determine what's actually going on here, what kind of help is available. Um, can this relationship be made healthy? Are you safe? These are things that cannot simply be determined in short form video clips on TikTok or any social media platform. Okay, let's talk about neurodivergence now. A common myth on social media presents neurodivergence synonymous with autism or spectrum-related disorders. With this comes a massive amount of misinformation about what it looks like to be considered neurodivergent. So a lot of what is promoted out there is neurodivergence means a spectrum-related disorder of some kind. In truth, the term neurodivergent refers to many neurological conditions such as dyslexia, ADHD, dyspraxia, Tourette syndrome, and OCD. It's a fairly broad term that is not just synonymous with spectrum-related disorders or conditions. You'll often see content saying things like signs you're neurodivergent with a list of possible symptoms. And because this is such a widely encompassing term, these lists are very misleading. 1 in 7 people are considered neurodiverse, and none of them are the same. It doesn't look the same for any one of these people. Not experiencing a symptom listed that you might see on one of these videos does not mean that you're not neurodiverse. And experiencing one of the symptoms you see doesn't necessarily mean that you are. And only a trained professional can really help you get in there and explore this and provide an accurate diagnosis. So we're seeing a lot of these lists and people online talking about their various symptomology of being neurodiverse. And it's causing people to question, because they can relate to that symptom, they must be neurodiverse. And if they're neurodiverse, that must mean they're on the spectrum in some way. So there is a massive amount of misleading information about neurodiverse conditions. For example, TikTok has been really useful bringing the term stimming into the conversation, but much like gaslighting with narcissism, stimming with neurodivergence is being referenced inaccurately a lot. Stimming is a repetitive body movement or sound to help cope with emotions. It is a term used for self stimulating behaviors. Stimming is not the only symptom used to accurately diagnose neurodivergence. Almost everybody stims in some way. A lot of the videos we're seeing right now are showing people saying, I've been stimming for years. I never realized it's because I was on the spectrum. I've been stimming for years. I guess I have ADHD and I never knew it. Everybody stims in some way. It's possible that stimming is one of the symptoms of a condition or a diagnosis that can be given by a mental health professional later. But simply because you stim, simply because you find comfort in some of those self-stimulating coping behaviors does not necessarily mean you're neurodiverse or have one of the conditions listed under that widely encompassing term. Again, only a trained professional can accurately diagnose a neurological disorder. If you or someone you love can relate to any of the symptoms you see on social media, please refer them to a specialist. I think that's where these videos can be really helpful. You see something on these lists that you relate to, use that as an opportunity to learn more information about it rather than taking that 20-second video as your cue to diagnose yourself with something that you might not even have, or might actually be the symptom of something entirely different. All right, so now let's talk about borderline personality disorder, or BPD, as I'll refer to it in some of these slides. Teenagers, and most of them girls, are sharing raw accounts of big emotions and self-destructive behaviors, such as self-harm, promiscuity, relationship troubles, etc., online via TikTok videos, and they're attributing these to borderline personality disorder, and millions of teens are watching them, and as a result, are diagnosing themselves with borderline personality disorder. When we talk about things like self-harm, promiscuity, relationship troubles, etc., they they're expressions in some ways, sometimes, of the emotional volatility that is a typical characteristic of adolescence. Now, we have to be careful when we say that, because we don't want to take things like self-harm and say like, oh, this is typical for adolescents. It's not quite that simple. However, some of these, wide mood and relationship fluctuations from love to hate, both with self and with others, can simply sometimes come with the developmental stages and growth throughout adolescence and that time spent maturing and developing and learning and growing. It does not necessarily indicate that a person has borderline personality disorder or even necessarily symptoms of borderline personality disorder. It's more complex than that. And anytime personality disorder is being given to an adolescent or promoted via adolescence, it's troubling simply because these are still growing minds. Personality disorders cannot be diagnosed at that young of an age anyway, because mental health experts would tell you and would even agree it is too young, it's too early to tell, because some of these depictions can be fairly common and developmentally normal at this time. BPD is often presented as cute or quirky mood and relationship instability issues. Many people formally diagnosed with BPD have taken to online forums to discuss the glamorization of this diagnosis on TikTok, when it has in reality ruined their lives and hurt their loved ones. And that's a direct quote that I found in one of the forums from a person formerly diagnosed in adulthood with borderline personality disorder, and the way that she's been affected by watching how so many people are presenting their BPD diagnoses and symptoms online. Someone with this diagnosis of BPD has extreme and intense fear of abandonment about most people most of the time. It's characterized by intense shifts from love to hate within relationships, self injurious behaviors, and dissociation, among other things. And only 1 to 3% of people in the world have borderline personality disorder, which is really important to keep in perspective. It's very similar to narcissistic personality disorder. I mean, that's 0.5 to 5. BPD is 1 to 3%. This is a very small portion of the population that would actually meet the criteria for a full diagnosis of these conditions. So that compared with how frequently we're hearing them talked about, or hearing people talk about how they know somebody or have it themselves or have dated somebody or works with somebody, maybe you are encountering symptoms that are on the list, but that does not, or a trait that's on the list, but that doesn't mean that the people around us are diagnosed with personality disorders. While some elements feel relatable, the formal diagnosis is rare and actually very painful, related to BPD. And I think that's what we're seeing too. It's that relatability element. It's when we see these symptoms listed, most of us can find ourselves on most of these lists in some ways. So it can be tricky, even for adults, not just adolescents, to see some of these things and being like, oh, that's so me. That one thing on the list is so you, but borderline personality disorder might not be you. So it's being able to discern the relatability of it, and, finding that part useful with, okay, what is the true diagnosis here, if anything at all. BPD is sometimes used as an excuse for unhealthy behavior that cannot be changed. TikTok is outspoken about personality disorders like BPD being unchangeable. With this has come an uptick in people captioning content, "Don't blame me, it's my BPD," or "Don't blame me, blame my BPD," as if to say they cannot be held responsible for or adjust their actions. And while personality disorders are notoriously difficult to treat, real help and relief is possible with a specialist trained in modalities to alleviate symptoms and problematic behaviors associated with BPD. A commonly utilized treatment method is DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. So this is just, it's sad to see this misinformation, because it does indicate to people that some of these things can't be changed, which is hurtful when somebody in your life you suspect might have some of these things, to consider like they might always be like this. They don't need to take any accountability for these things. They can't help it. They're not responsible for them. It can perpetuate abuse cycles in relationships. And then for the person experiencing these symptoms for themselves, it can spread misinformation about whether or not they can get help, whether or not they can change, whether or not they even need to change. Because if they have an actual, personality disorder, they can't help it anyway. So both people on both ends of the spectrum are getting hurt by misinformation of this nature. So there are many more trending mental health misconceptions on TikTok and social media. The previous slides simply highlighted some of the most popular ones of this moment. Other examples out there that you will see very frequently on TikTok include OCD, eating disorders, ADHD, and various addictions, all of which I could have created, at least 3 to 4 slides regarding this is what we're seeing pushed out, but this is what's actually true. This is what's being pushed out. This is how it's dangerous. So this exists within nearly all, mental health content that's out there right now, not just the few that I listed in the previous slides. So let's talk for a little while about how we can productively engage with this content that we're seeing on TikTok and social media. Because like we said before, there are some benefits. Now we know more about the risks, but how can we learn to use this in a helpful way? Is it even possible to learn how to use this in a helpful way? One thing that we can do to productively engage would be to seek out real education. In more recent years, social media has actually taken initiatives to combat this misinformation on their platforms, which has been really cool to see that even these platforms are recognizing, okay, this is getting a little out of hand at this point. Um, Fact checking has become much more prominent all across the board, but that's even applying to mental health content now, which is awesome. In September 2023, TikTok included mental health resources as part of its safety center. So there are links embedded within the TikTok platform that people can click on to access real education about some of the things they're seeing. They can explore guides on topics like well being, eating disorders, suicide, and self harm, created by expert organizations, ensuring that users are receiving credible information. Of course, this is only there if the users click on that or seek it out. So it's not, front page by any means, but it's at least there. It's provided as an option for those that are seeking it out. So I think promoting the fact that real education is necessary to engage in some of this content in a healthy way is so important. In the meantime, more safety regulations and warning within the content, within those, short clips that we see themselves, would be useful. If it's not backed by credible or reliable information, that's a problem. And knowing that before or when you click on a video could be so helpful. Clicking on it and seeing this is not backed by any kind of expert organization or credentialed or licensed person. This is simply, one user's experience with this mental health condition would be so helpful for young minds and old minds alike when we click on videos like this. Until then, providing/accessing content that combats the rampant misinformation with facts is key. So just encouraging people to seek out real education and not use these videos as their only mental health education. Excuse me. Okay, so 2 is access counseling services for accurate diagnoses. Do not use these things to diagnose yourself with any mental health condition. Whenever a person can relate to content discussing symptoms of a mental health condition, consulting with a trained professional is key. Social media platforms cannot accurately diagnose or treat mental health conditions, even the ones created by a therapist. Because one thing you'll notice is, therapists have TikToks now, and lots of good therapists have TikTok accounts and Instagram pages where they're promoting their skills, their services, their areas of specialty. They're, pumping out content about this stuff online. And I think that can be super useful. I love to see that. Even with that, though, the good ones usually indicate on there somewhere that this is just a snapshot. For more information or continue working on some of these things, do X, Y, or Z. So they're a bit more thoughtful in the content that they're pushing out. But all that being said, actual therapists are out there doing some of these things as well. And a professional will need to work with you for several sessions and learn more about your personal history and symptomology before providing an accurate diagnosis. So a TikTok video is just not going to cut it, even the ones made by a therapist. Hopefully the therapists that are making them are all being diligent about providing that content. But definitely the people providing this content that aren't therapists are usually not providing anything like that on there. So just, spreading the word that accessing and encouraging others that accessing counseling services for accurate diagnoses is crucial. 3, we can productively engage in TikTok and social media mental health content by utilizing these platforms for promotion rather than intervention. And there's a huge difference between the two. Utilizing these videos as a source for promotion can be helpful in destigmatizing mental health issues and gaining a supportive community that speaks openly about mental and emotional struggles. But utilizing this in place of real therapy is unhelpful and potentially dangerous. And I think this is the difference between the benefits and the risks associated in this information. The promotion is where I think a lot of the benefits are coming from, and the intervention and the diagnoses, I think, are where a lot of the risks are coming from. So utilizing it for the promotion, for the destigmatization, for the starting points, rather than here are some treatment tips or tricks to try to, treat a diagnosis that you may not even have. Proper interventions come from accurate diagnoses, and both are needed from a trained professional. So sometimes these videos of these interventions you'll try are specifically tailored to get to, again, a diagnosis that you might not even have. So I think it can be discouraging for those that are trying to proactively take care of their mental health to be trying these tips and tricks that they're seeing online and feeling like none of this works for me. None of this is helpful. Therapy doesn't even work. And unfortunately, that's probably not true. One, it's probably not an accurate diagnosis to begin with. Therefore, the intervention you're using to treat the diagnosis was never going to work to begin with. So keep that in mind. And for checking for credible sources and citations. So make sure that we are checking all posts for these credible sources and reading those in addition to just consuming the post itself. So again, it's using the posts as a starting point. If these are not listed, remember that this post is likely showing a personal opinion and or mental or emotional experience and cannot be used as factual information or formal diagnosis criteria. And that's one of the main things that I would like to see promoted a little more. This is my personal experience with this. This is what I'm going through right now. Here are the things that I'm considering rather than, presenting it as criteria of an actual diagnosis. And so I think if all users, all creators are intentionally adding these sources, these citations to click on, that's a good indicator that, hey, they've done this research, they've looked into this. If any of this is relatable to you at all, click on this link, check out more information here. Here's a link to click on to, access mental health services, virtually or in person. Just adding that stuff in there as a sign of, goodwill and just responsibility when you are talking about, topics as serious as this, adding the next steps in there for people that are consuming this would be a really good thing to do. While there are real benefits to mental health promotion on TikTok, please remember scrolling is no substitute for counseling and watching videos is not treatment. The next step towards healing is available with a trained professional. Here I listed all the references that I used. So as a part of, practicing what I'm preaching here today, everything that I discussed today, you can learn more information about in these links below. A lot of the, excuse me, personal quotes and things that I listed on here are coming from the forums and the actual research articles noted here. So please, if you're interested in learning more about any of the diagnoses, any more information about gaslighting, stimming, all of that's here for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at jerry@kcresolve.com. Shoot us an email. Also, please be aware that there is a post test to this CEU presentation. So take the time to follow that link that will be sent to you to take the post test so you can get credit for this CEU. I really appreciate your time today. I hope it was beneficial, and I'll see you next time.